Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hey everybody, I'm Bill Dodd, and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Troy Moling is off this week, but I'm happy to be filling in for him. Beginning our broadcast today, as the Nebraska floodwaters continue to recede, it's becoming clear just how much devastation there is and how long this recovery effort will last. For many producers, cleaning up and getting back to normalcy is the first thing to come to mind. However, before cleanup begins, producers should first focus on documenting damages to their property and livestock before getting things cleaned up. FSA Public Affairs and Outreach Coordinator Bobbie Kriz-Wickham stopped by the show to explain why.
There's kind of four main programs that we've been wanting to make sure we get the word out about and making sure that producers are aware of. The first one is the Livestock Indemnity Program, and there are some timelines associated with that. LIP, Livestock Indemnity Program, or LIP, provides some financial assistance to producers who lost livestock as a result of an adverse weather event, and of course flood would be included in that. There is a 30-day notice of loss window for that program. So producers who maybe faced livestock losses as a result of the flood need to make sure that they're getting in our office or giving us a call within 30 days of when those losses become apparent, so that we can get that application started on their behalf. And then also associated with LIP is documentation. It's important for producers to have good documents for beginning inventory as well as the losses that they suffered as a result of the incident. Things like veterinarian certification, bank records, insurance records, dated photos and video, third-party certifications. All those types of things work as good documentation for notice of loss under LIP. We recognize in some cases that documentation of loss is difficult. Maybe those livestock got lost downstream, and producers have no idea where they ended up. So the important point with that is to talk to your county office about what options might be available for documentation under those circumstances. The second program we've been talking a lot about is the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish, or ELAP. The way it might be applicable for producers related to the floods, it covers some financial assistance for lost forage or feedstuffs. So for producers maybe who had hay bales that washed downstream, maybe hay bales that are still sitting in floodwaters and rotting and unusable, there could be some financial assistance available through ELAP. The third program that we've been doing some talking about is the Emergency Conservation Program, or ECP. That program provides some cost share assistance for producers in association with rehabilitating damaged fields, as well as some fence repair and replacement. That program was authorized in 45 Nebraska counties. Just this week we received notice of that. So they'll be able to begin taking applications in those counties that generally are on the eastern, northeastern, kind of north-central region where the flooding's been the worst. The important thing for producers to keep in mind with that program is that if you want to come in and get some cost share to make some repairs to damaged fields or do fence repair and replacement, you need to come in and get your application going before you do any of those repairs. So we've got to get that application started before you start your efforts to do that rehabilitation and repair. And then the last program that also has a timeline we want folks to really be aware of is the emergency release for grazing of Conservation Reserve Program acres. That was announced earlier this week. The emergency release was statewide for producers and CRP contract holders who want to move some livestock onto those CRP acres. Come in and see us first before you start grazing those CRP acres. We need to fill out some paperwork on both the CRP contract holder side as well as the livestock owner. It's a window of time that ends on April 30th, so it's only approved for the month of April, and those livestock have to be off of that CRP by May 1. So we want producers to get in and talk to us right away so we can get applications going for that as well.
Are there any other specific programs available through FSA that you'd like to highlight?
We do have 2 farm loan programs that trigger with the presidential disaster declaration in the 65 counties that were declared. That's the disaster set-aside program, and it allows existing FSA customers to set aside a payment to free up some funds to address their disaster situation. And then there's an emergency loan program also that could be a tool for producers. That common theme is to contact your county FSA office. You know, we care about our farmer and rancher customers, and we want to be able to help set those customers up to be able to access these programs successfully and to help them in these disaster situations. So give our office a call, stop in so that we can help you figure out what programs might work for you and what kind of assistance we can provide.
For more information, you can go online to www.farmers.gov, which is a national-level USDA site. For producers in Nebraska specifically, www.fsa.usda.gov/NE. These sites will allow users to access more information on the programs we've just discussed. And moving on to markets now, there's a lot for producers in the Midwest to think about since the floods hit. Planting has been postponed or even canceled for some producers. Now, what's the cost associated with that? Some are feeling heavy effects from livestock loss, and with all the losses producers are feeling in the weeks since the floods hit, how does this affect marketing and risk management? This week we're joined by the president of Heartland Farm Partners, Jeff Peterson, who discussed how the floods are affecting local markets and how you should adjust your marketing and risk management plans. Have there been any personal impacts for you, anybody you know, or you personally with these floods?
You know, with these floods, it seems like a lot of our customers and a lot of our friends have been impacted. Fortunately, I haven't been impacted directly, but it seems like everybody we talk to has either been out helping individuals take care of things, or they physically are dealing with somebody who's been impacted by it. So it seems like it's touched about the whole state and the whole region for that matter.
Can you describe any impact on grain or livestock that you would see in the coming months, and what specifically?
Yeah, you know what, there's a lot of impacts, and what it seemed like is everything that needed a sense of urgency to be dealt with got hurt, you know, the first. So any of the livestock that got killed, that's always bad, and our prayers go out to those who lost the livestock. But in addition to that, what we see is anybody who needed to go ahead and feed livestock were definitely impacted as the floods. But then it moved beyond that. Just trying to go ahead and take the livestock to market got impacted. And then we've seen the next really step from that got to be the logistical item. Anything that dealt with trucks or trains all of a sudden started backing up. So your ethanol plants started backing up. They might be able to get corn, but they couldn't get rid of their ethanol. And then that happened overall on the soybean processing side. So it really kind of ground agriculture in Nebraska to a halt in many areas.
As far as immediate impact on any market prices or futures, what are we seeing there? Yeah,
you know what, unfortunately, as bad as this was, the bigger impact we're probably seeing is on local basis levels and changes. It seems like at the national level, the markets really didn't make much of an adjustment because of what we've seen so far. It's kind of sitting back and waiting to see how everything turns out before we probably see any focus come in on the future side of the market from Nebraska's impacts.
Now, we know with these floods, planting has been delayed or flat out canceled for some producers. Can you speak to any detail on that?
Yeah, and it is a big deal. The thing that everybody is trying to do right now is they're trying to sort out how big of an impact, how many acres. Because we were fortunate last year, we didn't have a lot of prevent plant. But this year there is going to be prevent plant this year, and that's going to be sorted out. There's a crop report that comes out at the end of the week here, and is going to talk and try to address the planted acreage numbers, prospective planting numbers. But you know, in Nebraska, we're definitely trying to sort out the amount of acres, because there will be some acres that will go unplanted.
Now, for soybean producers, it's been an interesting year. First, we've had the trade woes, and now this. Is there any updates on how that's really affecting the soy?
Yeah, I really feel for the soybean producers. It has been quite a year because we are finally starting to get back some demand, and now we've got the problem of logistically getting those bushels moved out, you know, whether it be by barge on the Mississippi River or to go ahead and get it railed out, you know, or trucked to the different markets. But you know, those things will clear up over time. So let's talk about the big thing that's impacting soybeans, and that would be the talks with China. So things are moving forward. As a matter of fact, this week we've got our lead negotiators in China negotiating, working through those details, trying to figure out how we're going to be able to get it so that we can enforce some of those items that we agree to with China that they're going to do. Now, what's nice about this, though, is that next week, actually the Chinese trade delegation comes back to the U.S. and there'll be some additional talks that will happen then. So that'll be another positive step. And then when we get those 2 weeks of discussions done, then we hope that maybe President Xi and Trump can get together and finally get this trade talks behind us. So we are making progress, but we're not there yet.
And I guess lastly, do you have any tips as far as marketing or risk management goes with all the flooding that's been happening?
You know, and that's what's hard, is that there definitely has been problems that have been created in different areas. But with those problems, what we want to look through them, and we want to look for opportunities. And some of the first opportunities that I think actually are showing up is there are some markets that are showing some really good basis opportunities. And this would be basis on the old crop side. So what that means, if you're a farmer and you've got some old crop bushels, maybe they're in storage in the elevator, or you've got them on your farm, this gets to be a good time in here to watch the basis closely and look at doing some basis contracts. We don't want to physically sell here yet. We think there'll be better opportunities to sell down the road, because we think there'll be some uncertainty about this weather, about this wetness, about the acres, and we think if we could get a Chinese trade deal behind us, we think that that would help give this market a little boost. So that'd be the first thing I'd look at, the basis opportunities. Then from there, I think we will have an opportunity when we see some of this uncertainty happen. It'll build some additional premium into these prices on the future side, and that will give us a chance to then make some additional sales on the old crop and also on the new crop. Where is that level for us? We're probably setting about 10 cents above where we're at, where we'd want to be getting ready to make a round of sales on the new crop, and then also be making some sales on the old crop sides.
Next week, we'll be joined by crop economist Dr. Frayne Olson from North Dakota State University. If you have a question you'd like for us to ask him, email us or get in touch on social media, and we'll be sure to pass your question along. In 1985, Nebraska opened its first ethanol plant, and since that time, another 24 plants have sprung up across the state. Now, these plants have a capacity of more than 2.5 billion gallons, making Nebraska the #2 ethanol-producing state in the nation. Now, while ethanol may not be one of Nebraska's top 10 exports, the industry has had a very positive effect on Nebraska's economy. In February, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln released a report on the economic impacts of the state's ethanol industry. While many people may not find it too surprising the ethanol trade has bolstered our state's economy in recent years, the numerous ways it impacts our manufacturing and grain production as a whole is quite profound.
So a big part of Nebraska's manufacturing industry is related to agriculture, and part of that is further processing of the products that farms and ranches produce. So the ethanol industry represents a substantial increase in the processing of the crops that are generated in Nebraska, and also produces important inputs for the cattle feeding industry. So it's a way to take our natural production from our farms and ranches and support a larger Nebraska economy.
While corn and ethanol prices have been down over the last few years, the ethanol industry hasn't slowed down one bit. Even though prices on ethanol-related products have slightly diminished, the industry itself continues to grow in terms of production and employment.
Now, the price environment has changed quite a bit since the earlier part of this decade, with the price of ethanol, the price of fuel, and the price of corn all down meaningfully. But in terms of the production of the industry, the labor employed in that production, the spin-off impacts on the economy, the industry has continued to expand, although at a more moderate pace since 2014.
Despite falling corn prices in recent years, these positive economic impacts have also been reflected in the local corn market due to their higher demand from nearby ethanol plants. The study noted a steadily positive impact on local cash prices for producers near ethanol production facilities. For example, a producer near an ethanol plant producing 220 bushels of corn per acre would receive an additional $11.44 per acre each year.
We kind of looked at the corn prices basis, basically, relative to ethanol plant locations. And what we found was kind of a strengthening basis in areas where we do have an ethanol plant. Again, you know, it's another alternative place that producers can sell their product. So again, a little more demand in certain areas helps to increase that price available to the farmers. While Nebraskans are certainly purchasing ethanol products and seeing its benefits at the pump, a majority of the ethanol produced in Nebraska is ultimately exported to other markets domestically and abroad.
With our low population here in the state compared to other states, 94% of our ethanol production actually leaves the state, and it's well positioned to meet the demands throughout the country and the world.
While the economic benefits of ethanol are making a positive impact to our state's economy, we can't forget one of the most appealing aspects of this industry. While ethanol and biofuels are lessening our country's dependence on foreign fossil fuels, we're also seeing a reduction in greenhouse gases.
One of the ways that ethanol meets the renewable fuel standard is to demonstrate at least a 20% greenhouse gas emissions reductions. That was when the initial law was passed, but there's been a USDA study recently showing that ethanol actually can decrease greenhouse gas emissions by upwards of 40%. So we're really helping to clean up the environment and increase the health of the citizens of the state.
Next time you see ethanol products at your local gas station, keep in mind, pumping that product into your vehicle is also pumping money into our state's economy and helping to pump greenhouse gases out of our atmosphere. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd. Today, blends of petroleum-based gasoline with 10% ethanol, or commonly referred to as E10, account for more than 95% of the fuel consumed in vehicles with gasoline engines. And it's officially springtime, so we'll be seeing a lot of sun over the next several months, and that's good news for solar power. A couple weeks ago, Market Journal's Troy Molling spoke with Nebraska Extension's John Hay about the steps the ag industry is taking to make this a feasible moneymaker for farmers. Here's part 2 of that conversation.
A lot of companies out there really trying to advertise to landowners, trying to get some leases signed. There are some leases being signed. I think some of those companies are very serious about something that might happen. We actually have some chances of getting some large solar projects in Nebraska in the next few years. There are some companies also, I think, that are out there trying to just accumulate larger amounts of land in the hope that in the future that there will be value for that. And these are long-term contracts, and so they're really, really important to pay attention to. You can imagine that if this contract was signed, it's a 40-year contract. A contract signed in 1979 would just be expiring this year.
Wow, yeah.
And so we don't know what that future, 40 years from the future, looks like. So that's a hard decision to make, and one you really want to talk to your family a lot about, and make sure that a attorney's involved in the discussion.
And you said there was one agreement in place for what, 3,000 acres?
Yeah, there's some large land leases out there for potential solar farms. There's one north of Norfolk that made it into the paper recently. It's a fairly large one, and I rounded that to maybe 3,000 acres. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it's going to end up being, but that's a really big solar project. And so those types of things are out there, and that's really changing the face of those areas a little bit, because that will be a lot of land under lease. And
you were telling me before we started, how many solar panels would that be on that amount of land?
Hundreds of thousands of solar panels on that. It would just, it's hard to imagine that size of a system. But at the same time, if the economics are right, those farmers have a chance to make some money. If the price of electricity is right, it doesn't affect our price of electricity much, maybe even helps it a little bit. So it's all about those economics.
Okay, so we talked about the federal tax credit for 2019. Any other changes to the laws or regulations we should be aware of?
Well, there are some potential changes. I mean, obviously, somebody asked me one time, what's the risk of putting this solar array in? And I said, well, the risk is policy change. Where with policy changes, the price of that electricity may be different than what we ran in our economic analysis. And there are some bills in the legislature right now that might change Nebraska's policy. We'll follow those and see how that goes. They're not major changes, but they are changes, and we'll see. There are some changes that have taken place in other states as well. So kind of follow those things, and you could do the calculation with the new policy if that would be a way to try to mitigate that risk a little bit.
And another proposal we got out there, the Green New Deal that was recently introduced by some politicians in D.C. So you're an energy guy. What does that mean for energy? Well, the Green New Deal is fascinating in a lot of ways, but it can also get very political. But I do look at it in a way to say that the idea that we want to talk about what it would take to maybe have more renewables in this country is an interesting discussion in and of itself. And where that's going to go, I don't know. I think that the reality is that cooler heads are going to come up with hopefully
middle of the road decisions that are both economically feasible and lead us to more green energy. But the reality is, thinking about what it would take is a good discussion, and we ought to not necessarily look at some of those things as negatively as they have been in certain circles.
One thing to mention, since recording our interview with John, the Green New Deal was struck down in the Senate. But you can make sure to still check out part 1 of our story with John, and that can be found on our Market Journal YouTube page. The exploits of the Dakota Lake Research Farm near Pierre, South Dakota, and its farm manager, Dwayne Beck, are well documented. According to numbers from 2014, the farm has helped increase crop production in the surrounding area by $1.6 billion compared with production in 1986. At a cover crop management day held earlier this year in Columbus, Beck pointed out that this wasn't because the farm set out to improve yields, but better manage the ecosystem, improve water infiltration of the soil, and harvesting more sunlight for crop growth and biomass production. You can read about Beck's discussion in the March Nebraska Farmer. It's time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Now it's time to say hello to April, so how's this week shaping up?
Well, Bill, we have seen some spring weather this week, although it's not the type of spring weather we'd like to see for an extended period of time. We had a couple days during the middle of the week, but that was sandwiched between precipitation events. Of course, we had the event last weekend that brought a wave across the state. We did see some concentrated areas of 1/2 inch to 1 inch precipitation in portions of central, south central, and a little bit in the southern panhandle. Outside of that area, we've seen anywhere from a trace to upwards of about 1/3 of an inch. As you got to extreme northern Nebraska, we didn't see a lot of significant moisture, and then we had another wave move through the region on Thursday. That dropped some localized heavy precipitation in a band about a county to a county and a half wide from just east of McCook all the way over to the Falls City region. And then, of course, the main low came out, and we're still dealing with that this morning. So as we look at the upper air pattern, here's the system that brought the inclement weather to us. It's strengthening over the Great Lakes, bringing cold air in, and so that's why we've seen a mixture of rain and snow across portions of eastern Nebraska. As high pressure tries to build into this region, we should start to see that precipitation push off toward the east-southeast as the day progresses. As you can see, the models indicate a little bit of flurry activity here, but it's probably overdoing this significantly. And then we get a respite as we go into the day tomorrow. A little weak wave moves to our south, but the main emphasis over the Great Lakes in the northeastern United States is high pressure is firmly in control across the central United States. So most of the precipitation we see is in the southern Rockies and then off to our southeast. By the time we get into the day on Monday, this wave opens up even more and gives them another reinforcing shot of precipitation. We do see a little bit of weak activity moving across this region with low pressure trying to develop at the surface in western South Dakota. We just don't have much moisture to feed into this system, so it looks like pretty much a dry frontal boundary passage. And then as we get in the day on Tuesday, we are going to see trough building in the western United States, starting to shoot energy out into the central Rockies. Low pressure tries to develop in portions of northern Wyoming, but once again, we're going to be moisture starved with this system, so primarily the focus will be over the Rocky Mountain region, and some of that may extend out into the northern plains. As we get into the midweek period, we start to see that trough trying to bring some energy across Nebraska. Low pressure develops in the Texas Panhandle. That will allow some moisture to feed toward the north, but it looks like the models want to, at least the GFL, wants to concentrate the moisture to our north. I think it'll be a little bit farther south, but primarily will be to our north for the most part, and then that system on Thursday moves over to the Great Lakes region. We see high pressure once again moving into our region. That should help to alleviate us from seeing much in the way of significant moisture, as that will remain to the south with a little bit of weak energy moving in the southern stream. The main core areas to our west. And then as we get into the day on Friday, we get a big storm system moving onshore. It's going to spread some significant moisture into the western United States, and eventually that will make its way downstream to us as we get into the later part of the weekend. Do show low pressure developing on the high plains, but it looks like the concentrated area of precipitation will remain south of us in the southern stream. So the 8 to 14 day forecast shows that temperatures actually are going to start increasing as the southern stream becomes a dominant player. And in terms of precipitation, with that system coming out, it looks like a very wet weekend as we end next weekend.
Thanks, Al. For our final story today, the Nebraska Crop Improvement Association, or NCIA, has a word of warning about some new crop soybean seed. Most years, seed lots tested by the NCIA range from about 88 to 98% germination. This year, some of those samples were as low as 43%. Market Journal's Troy Molling sat down with UNL Plant Pathologist Dr. Tamra Jackson-Ziems to learn what impacted producers can do.
Well, our crop improvement associations in a number of states are responsible for testing seed for seed quality related issues, for instance, and some of those are related to germination, and that's what the concern is now. And so having seed that are coming in at below the optimal germination rates could create some issues for our producers in 2019. Namely, if they aren't aware that the seed might have a lower germination rate, they may end up with a shorter or a smaller stand than they might be expecting, fewer plants out there. And so we recommend that they pay close attention to the germination rate that's reported on the tags on these bags. And it's definitely not all of the seed. Most of the seed is looking great, very high germination rate. We're talking about 25% or less of the seed coming out of, especially out of Illinois and Iowa, where they also had some diseases. We also saw a lot of diseases that were much worse than we normally see, like, for example, Phomopsis seed decay. And unfortunately, those do impact seed quality. Well, some other states like Illinois, Indiana, and Iowa also saw the same diseases, and that's where most of our soybean seed is produced. And so those diseases can impact germination and quality. Thus, it very well might impact us this year too.
And for producers watching who are impacted by this, what are some things that they should do?
If they have any concerns about their seed germination, I hope they'll talk to their seed company agronomist about any issues they might be seeing. The other thing is you can adjust your seeding rate. And so if for instance the germination rate was maybe only 90% of what you expected, you can bump up your seeding rate that extra 10% and still hopefully achieve the stand that you're hoping for. The third thing is that this might be a good year to consider the use of one or more seed treatment fungicides. And that's easier said than done because you'll have to make some decisions on which ones to use. And so if they go back to the February 13th issue of Crop Watch, we have resources in that issue showing a list of fungicides and which ones work better on diseases like Phomopsis seed decay, because other diseases like Pythium and Phytophthora will require different fungicide seed treatment. So they might even have to stack different classes of fungicides to get the best effects.
You can read more about this issue by going to cropwatch.unl.edu and searching soybeans. Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. I hope you can join us again next week. It's been a lot of fun filling in for Troy this week, but in the meantime, I'm Bill Dodd, and thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.